I did want to begin with Ukraine, about the capacity that Ukraine now has, having retaken Kherson. Do they have the capacity for a counteroffensive to even approach Crimea and try to break that land bridge?
Yeah, I think, so as we're looking at the trajectory of the conflict, kind of going through the next several months, honestly, we're seeing a kind of a reduced tempo already of the conflict. Most of the fighting right now is around Bakhmut and the Donetsk area, and sort of has slowed down with the withdrawal of Russia from the sort of western Kherson area to the east of the river. And we expect that's likely to be what we see in the coming months. And then once you get past the winter, the sort of question is, what will the counteroffensive look like potentially in the spring, in effect in March and in that area? And we expect that, frankly, both militaries are going to be in a situation where they're going to be looking to try to refit, resupply, in a sense, reconstitute so that they're kind of prepared for that counteroffensive. But we actually have a fair amount of skepticism as to whether or not the Russians will be, in fact, prepared to do that. And I think, yeah, I think more optimistically for the Ukrainians in that time frame.
To that point, to what extent is Putin getting real information about the war and about the reverses they've suffered?
Yeah, I mean, this has obviously been an issue that's been discussed pretty widely. And I think what I can say is that I think Putin was surprised by his military's sort of lack of performance and the fact that they did not accomplish more. That's, I'm sure, no surprise to anybody here. I do think he is becoming more informed of the challenges that the military faces in Russia, but it's still not clear to us that he has a full picture at this stage of just how challenged they are. And I mean, we see shortages of ammunition, poor morale, supply issues, logistics, a whole series of concerns that they're facing.
You said in June that he had not changed his objective to retake Ukraine. Do you think that's changed at all?
Yeah, what we say is that he has not changed his political objectives, and at least we don't see evidence of that. And in effect, I think, you know, as we look at it, you know, when you say his objective to retake Ukraine, I think there are a lot of interpretations of what that means. And so, you know, his political objective is effectively to control it. He doesn't see Ukraine, and of course he says this publicly on a pretty regular basis, as a separate country. He sees it as part of, in effect, his, you know, sovereign national ambit. And I think the challenge is, what does that mean for his near-term military objectives? Are they going to be as expansive as they were at the beginning, or does he at some point recognize that he's incapable of doing what it is he intended to originally and sort of downscale what it is that he's willing to accept for now? I think our analysts would say, you know, he may be willing to do that on a temporary basis with the idea that he might then come back at this issue at a later time.
How debilitating is the destruction of the power grid in terms of Ukraine's ability to not just get through the winter, because it's a humanitarian disaster already, but to sustain its military?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think this is obviously, you know, we in the intelligence community spend a lot of time looking at the analysis of these issues. It is sometimes hard in the morning as you're reading the intelligence to sort of separate it out from the tragedy of what's happening every day. And I think, you know, as we watch these, you know, the population fight for their country and then see the just outrageous illegal attack on civilian infrastructure such as the grid. And it's not just the grid, right? It's gas, it's heating, it's a variety of other things that they're going after. I think you know, in part, they're doing this in order to undermine the Ukrainian will, in effect. And I think we're not seeing any evidence of that being undermined right now at this point. They are also looking potentially to affect Ukraine's capacity to, you know, prosecute the conflict. And it can, over time, obviously, have an impact. How much of an impact will be dependent on how much they go after, what they're capable of doing, the resilience of that critical infrastructure, our capacity to help them defend it in many respects. And then I think also there's the economic aspect of this. I mean, Ukraine's economy is suffering very badly. It's been devastating. And I think, you know, obviously taking down the grid will have an impact on that as well.
How quickly is Russia burning through its military stockpiles of munition?
I think I can give you precise numbers in this fora, but quite quickly. I mean, it's really pretty extraordinary. And our own sense is that they are not capable of indigenously producing what they are expending at this stage. So that is going to be a challenge, and that's why you see them going to other countries effectively to try to get ammunition. And of course, you know, we've indicated that their precision munitions are running out much faster in many respects. They have a lot of stockpiles. How viable those stockpiles are, how much they have, what they can use in different conflicts are obviously all questions that we look at quite carefully with our allies and partners.
How much are they relying on North Korea for relying their artillery?
I mean, we've indicated we've seen some movement, but it's not been a lot at this stage, and it is one of the ones that we're watching quite carefully because it would be significant potentially.
And the Iranian drones, which have been so effective in taking out the substations, so they don't have to use their advanced weaponry to take out power plants as long as they can interrupt the grid.
Yeah.
Do we also see evidence? There have been reports that Iranians are on the ground. Are they on the ground helping them to actually manufacture these drones?
What I can say is that we've obviously seen them give UAVs, and they tried, the Iranian regime first denied it, then they said, well, these were given before the war. You know, they had a variety of different excuses for it. I think we've also seen the Russians looking for other types of precision munitions from Iran, and that will be very concerning in terms of their capacity more generally, but it's probably as much as I can do.
Director Burns told me in July that Russia had suffered about 15,000 casualties. Are there losses continuing at that pace? Can you give us some estimate?
I won't do estimates, but I'll say that, you know, right now what we're seeing, as I mentioned, is kind of a reduced tempo. So we're not seeing just as many casualties as we have in the prior weeks and months.
Is there any evidence that China is supplying any material support other than buying their oil?
China continues to play sort of both sides of this game, right? I mean, they are continuing to work with Russia on a variety of things. They continue to do things like, you know, have meetings, find ways to support them in international fora to help them manage, you know, efforts to expose what the Russians are doing or provide condemnation. And they are providing different forms of assistance. We have not indicated publicly we don't see anything that is determinative of military assistance, but there are things on the margins of that, you know, concern us, and we'll obviously keep watching this.